What is up, everybody, and welcome to the All-NBA Show, part of the All-City Podcast Network. I'm your host, Adam Matas, and I'm joined by my esteemed colleague, Tim Legler. Legs, two great games last night. One, a great matchup that came down to the wire. One, a great performance from a team that's ascending. But still, a good night, a lot to talk about today.
Oh, no question, man. There's nothing better in this line of work than when the games give you the script. And they gave us a lot last night. So I don't know where you want to start, man. There's a lot to talk about.
There is a lot to talk about. We're definitely starting with the Timberwolves, though, and the statement defensive performance that they put on, an all-time memorable game. It's rare you talk about a game being memorable for like just one thing, but the defense they played, I think we're going to talk about that for a while. We're also going to talk about the Knicks and the Pacers in game one, because that game was phenomenal. Can't believe it got second billing. And then Mavs-Thunder, Celtics, Cavs, we'll preview those later on in the show. But first, we are presented as always by DraftKings. Stay tuned because you'll hear more about DraftKings and all it has to offer throughout the show. DraftKings, the crown is yours. All right. 106-80 sounds like a butt whooping, and yet somehow does not tell the story of what this game was. Aaron Gordon hit a couple of three-pointers, and I think he had 13 points in 5 minutes to start the game, which was the only thing that made this not a 25-0 start for the Timberwolves, and then it was downhill from there. They absolutely overwhelmed Denver with their pressure, their on-ball pressure, forced turnovers, disrupted Denver from even getting into their half-court offense. And this game, I mean, it's probably the most dominant win we'll see in this playoff run was game two of that one. What stands out to you, and how do you think about this game?
I'll take it a step further. Look, man, I really try hard not to ever be a prisoner of the moment or be hyperbolic or in any way in what you say. But I've got a large frame of reference for the league, as a player or analyst. And I've seen a lot of great defenses. I've played against great defenses. I played against the 90s Bulls team, which I thought was the greatest defensive team I'd ever seen. I got to see it firsthand, what that was like. The Knicks teams of that era, the Pacers, the Spurs teams, the Pistons again when they won the championship, the Warriors teams that were ranked at the top of the league defensively. Adam, I have never seen a half of basketball more dominant defensively than what I saw last night in the first half of that game, because you have to give it context. You're talking about a great offensive team with an all-time great player and a defending champion at home and a defending champion. So this, because earlier I had someone try to bring up the example of Orlando beating the Bulls back in the day. And then Jordan came out of retirement. And then the first game they played him in the playoffs the following year, they beat him by 40 points. Orlando Magic were not a defending champion. This is the defending champion at home with, in a lot of ways, their season on the line. So they're going to be desperate, give you their best punch. I have never seen anything like what I saw last night in the first half of that game, because there was literally no daylight for Denver. Minnesota pressured them up the floor. They denied passing lanes. They helped and recovered at a level that you can make an instructional video out of what they were doing last night with their help and recover, helping on penetration, back out, running guys off the 3-point line. And then to finish off the possession, I felt like every single shot that was taken in the paint was contested by multiple people. It wasn't just one guy with a hand up. There were multiple guys trying to contest everything and then holding them also in addition to that, for the most part, one attempt at it. The turnovers they forced, the shots they contested, the number of balls that were stripped out of hands of the Denver Nuggets. It was not NBA caliber. That it really wasn't. That I didn't feel like I was watching two NBA teams play. It felt like it was one dominant defensive NBA team and another team that had no business being out there. There's no other way to describe it, Adam. It was the most futile offensive performance that I literally can remember in a big spot, particularly by a team that I respect so much, by an offense that I have so much respect for, by a player that I have so much respect for, Nikola Jokic, and multiple players in that team. It was the word I was using today was emasculating. I really believe that.
It was so tough, but it's true.
Yeah. I mean, it really was. And Mike Malone actually said kind of what I was feeling, what he said after the game. He said, listen, this is embarrassing. We got humiliated at home. We got dominated. We were never in the game. Okay. My question to them is, what are you going to do about it? And I think there's no other summation. That is your coaching going into game 3. What are you willing to do about what just happened to you? Because that was an emasculating defensive performance. And I'm still shocked that it was that dominant in its totality. There was nothing about that half of basketball that was positive for the Denver Nuggets. And I just give most of the credit, the vast majority, to the Timberwolves. I want to say that. I'm not, hammering the Nuggets. I'm saying that's how great this defensive performance was, that we're talking about the Nuggets in these terms. I never, ever saw something like this coming in game 2.
So let's break it down. First of all, my guy, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, I don't know if we made a short list of guys who are rising right now in the playoffs. Nickeil Alexander-Walker might be the number one guy. And he's been doing this all year, by the way. He's been this kind of impact player. But in these playoffs, the way he has been able to put on-ball pressure, and look, the playoffs allow a little bit more physicality. I thought last night's game was one of the most physical playoff games of the playoffs. I'm not saying fouling. I'm just saying every game takes on its own what's acceptable. Both teams were allowed an enormous amount of contact early on. Denver completely wilted under that pressure. And to me, all right, you don't have Gobert. And you think defensive player of the year, rim protection. Now, what do you have? They have rim protection 50 feet from the basket. That's Nickeil Alexander-Walker, Anthony Edwards, Jaden McDaniels. It doesn't matter who's touching the ball. You have an elite on-ball defender who is going to be right up in you. He's not giving you any space. He's going to be right up in you. And Denver's weaknesses, we talked about one of the reasons I thought, look, I picked Denver in 7, but one of the reasons I thought this was going to be such a tough matchup for Denver was that team has former Nuggets coaches, former Nuggets exec. They know Denver's weaknesses. And one of their weaknesses is they don't have great ball handling. You have Jamal Murray, you have Reggie Jackson, end of list. Nobody else handles the ball at a good level. So what do? Extend the pressure all the way up. Murray clearly is a little bit hobbled, although I think more than being hobbled, he just was overwhelmed by the on-ball pressure. And as a result, everything, it's like they knocked out the foundation of Denver, the ability to get the ball up the court. Nothing else mattered. So it's Denver's ball movement, their post presence, all that stuff. It's complete non-factor because they knew the one adjustment that it would take. Get up the court, get into them, and you're going to waste 15 seconds of the shot clock every possession, and that's exactly what's happened. Denver is late shot clock in the rare instances they weren't turning the ball over.
Completely agree with everything you just said. I thought it was very telling. There was a specific play, and they mentioned it on the broadcast, and they actually showed a replay of it. Nickeil Alexander-Walker, in one of those possessions where he turned Murray like 3 times before half court, which you never see in the NBA anymore. And he was smiling at him. He cut him off the last time at half court and kind of perfect squared up, hit him in a chest, spun him off in another direction with a big smile on his face. And it said a lot. There's never been a group of guys with a more apt team nickname than what I saw last night. That was a pack of wolves. That was a feeding frenzy.
Really
That's how wolves hunt. Okay, I watch a lot of National Geographic Channel. That's how wolves hunt. They corner their prey. They do it in tandem, and then they overwhelm you with numbers. I mean, literally, that's what I was watching. Yeah. And you're right about the ball handling. It is a weakness for Denver. Very few teams are going to pressure you up like that. Okay, there was that affected them. But let's talk about once they did get over half court and they got into their sets, the number of guys that fought over the top of screens last night to disrupt any action was just not something you see in an NBA game. You see a lot of switching. You see a lot of under. You see a lot of drop coverage in the NBA now. You weren't watching that out of Minnesota last night. These guys were in them. They were challenging them. Do something about it. And when they did try to do something about it and go to the basket and And, I'm sure they were thinking, there's so much contact going on. I'm going to get this whistle. I feel like, and I've seen this repeatedly in all levels of basketball, referees get caught up in this stuff too, where they see one team that's out for blood, one team that is playing with a desperation, a physicality, and an activity level with their hands that it's impossible to even call it all if you tried. I was thinking last night, Adam, these plays were so strung together with the deflections, the strips, and the deflections and everything they were doing. They were so strung together that they never even had a chance sometimes to show you a replay of some of this stuff. Because I kept saying to myself,
you're in a row.
Yeah, seriously. I kept saying to myself, wait a second. Nobody got their arm chopped on that? I want to see a replay because how are these guys losing the ball like this? The problem is 3 plays had passed of similar stuff before you knew it, and they never got to the replay. So I don't know how much, stripping was going on across the forearms. And I don't know, but it couldn't have been too egregious because you're going to get some of that called. And by the way, Denver could react the same way. This was different, man. This was a look at a team's eye that absolutely came into this game and said, we are not allowing this team one breath of life, not one breath. And it was just an intent that was almost, I really did. It was almost unfair at one point. It was unfair. Because I thought Jamal Crawford was great on the broadcast. He said, looks like there's 7 guys on the court. It was like there's 7 defenders. And it didn't feel that way.
That's how it felt.
And I'm sure it felt that way to the Nuggets too. I mean, that was
because they were trapping the ball. They would be up trapping the ball, and when the ball swung, nobody was open. So that's what you mean about felt like there were 7 guys. Is in the rare instances when they did get the release valve, the ball would swing and like everybody was completely closed out on. I mean, it was so impressive, and it wasn't one guy. And here's the thing, Legs. This Timberwolves team reminds me so much of the Nuggets last year in this one regard. Teams figure out who they are over the course of the season, and sometimes that comes really late. The Timberwolves have been good all year, but there's been a belief with them in these playoffs that is growing by the game and an acceptance of the different sacrifices every player has to make. So one example of that, Jaden McDaniels last night was unbelievable. He shot 2 of 7. What was he in game 1? 0 of 5 or something like that? He has not shot the ball in this series. He hasn't gotten the ball. Plus 26 last night, a game high. Absolutely dominant. This is what happened last year with Denver. It's what happens with good teams when they come together is there's this acceptance of you wouldn't know unless I told you that Jaden McDaniels didn't shoot the ball last night because it didn't matter. The Wolves were a pack and everyone was just kind of doing their job. And that gets me to Karl-Anthony Towns. No Gobert last night. He had his partner gave birth to a child. He couldn't get back. There was a big windstorm and you think, okay, well, how's the defense going to survive? And how is the team going to have to adjust? Karl-Anthony Towns was unbelievable on both ends of the floor last night. 27 points, 12 rebounds, 3 of 5 from 3. And you talk about that's a big assignment when Gobert leaves. Like, okay, now Towns, you have to go guard Jokic. You have to score. You have to do all the stuff. He did it seamlessly. And when I see stuff like that, that's the mark to me of a champion is a team that can replace. There's no excuses. It's okay. Somebody has to step up and fill that role. Who can do it? You're not equipped to do it. Doesn't matter. You got to do it anyway, and you find a way. That was Karl-Anthony Towns last night. One of the numbers 27 and 12. He's had a lot of those games. That was one of the most impressive games of his entire career, in my opinion, because of how smooth he made defense and offense look last night.
Totally agree. He was fantastic last night. And there's something else we have to point out here. People years from now, you didn't see the game and you're scrolling through and you're looking through the archives and you pull this game up and you go, well, okay, that makes sense. They do have the defensive player of the year. So that would make sense. Oh, no, actually he wasn't there. He wasn't there. They didn't even have him. And here's the thing. And the reason I bring that up. So Naz Reid checks into the game that scores 15-12.
Yeah.
And the next 8 minutes, they outscored them 27-10. And Naz Reid brings a different component to their defense than Gobert. And I'm not going to sit here and say they're better defensively. It's a different look. Some teams, you're going to need like that last line of defense, Gobert defense. Okay. You're going to need that. Yeah. In this case, I felt like everything I was watching was about quickness. Beating Denver to every spot, multiple guys beating them to the spot, a swarm. The help and recover I was talking about, they were much quicker team with Naz Reid on the floor with Towns than they are with Towns and Gobert. That just makes sense. Rudy Gobert is like 7'3", and he's great defender, but it's just a lot harder for him to move from point A to point B that quickly. And Naz Reid could, and I thought that was a big difference I noticed in their team speed overall. And look, there was a frenetic sense in the air. And we want to give coaches all the credit all the time for having guys prepared. And I always say a big part of coaching in the NBA is defensive preparation. Like, that's going to tell me if a team's well coached when I watch a team play, the way that they're on a string, the way that they have an identity and a concept for each player that gets the ball and how they're going to try to make them play to their weaknesses and all that. That's teaching, and that starts in training camp, and you build throughout the season. Okay, so let's give their coaching staff credit for having these guys in an absolute rabid state of mind. But I'm gonna say this is directly a correlation of their best player. I think Anthony Edwards has them in this state of mind.
100%.
And he's 22 years old, Adam. He's only 22, man. He hasn't been around very long to go through this stuff. But the way he talks, how direct he is in his answers, how certain he is of what he's about to say, while, by the way, always giving respect, appropriate respect to his opponent. He's very mature beyond his years in the way he handles questions. But at the same time, he's very, very confident in what he's saying. And so I credit the look in his eyes with what was the look in this pack of Wolves' eyes, because they followed him. And everything they did to me was about speed and swarming you and cutting off angles and multiple efforts on the same play, and they'll give the coaches credit because, they prepare them from a game plan standpoint and, whatever they said to them pregame. Okay, great. This was about their team internally, knowing how important this game was, the significant of going back to Minnesota. It's 1-1 is a totally different feel with 3 days off with this team in Denver. Going up 2-0 to do it the way they did it, I don't know how anybody's going to make a really strong argument for me that Denver can still win this series.
I mean, it feels that to me feels like there's no reason to even, to speculate on that, how thoroughly Denver has been dismantled. But I want to stick on your Ant point for a second. I really believe this. I think this is the most underrated part in basketball. Throw out the X's and O's for a second here. Does your team believe in a single direction, a single idea, a single trait and characteristic? When you have an Anthony Edwards, and you see how confident he is, how competitive he is, how intense he is at all times, nobody is off the hook. Everybody has to match that and will match that because they're inspired by it. And then your team takes on that mentality. He is the pack leader, to use this example, and all of them behind them just match that energy. And that's why I say the Wolves, at one team or two or sometimes a couple teams in a playoffs, when the playoffs start to tell the truth and a team's real core traits start to emerge, you're seeing that whole Timberwolves team walking like Anthony Edwards right now. And that's why they have the magic to them. And on the other side, we haven't talked about, Murray was horrible in this game. He's been horrible in this playoffs. He shot 3 of 8. I mean, he is the story for Denver, 3 of 18. And he's shooting 38% in the playoffs. He's had 2 good quarters, and they came up big. End of game 2 against the Lakers, end of game 5 against the Lakers. Those were big quarters for him. Outside of that, he's been rough. But Jokic last night was just as disappointing. 5 of 13, 16-8. That's a good stat line. But he had no impact on solving whatever it was that the Wolves were doing to Denver.
Yeah.
And maybe, I don't know what you think, Legs, is that a function of a guard has to get him the ball? Or did you feel there was just a lot that he left on the floor last night for whatever reason, just was quick to throw in the towel?
It's the first time I can ever remember watching Jokic play when I was kind of pointing out and noticing limitations physically. Normally it doesn't matter. Normally it doesn't matter to you, right? Because he's not the quickest. He doesn't play vertically off the ground. We get it. He's not the greatest athlete in the world. It never matters. We don't even think about that when we're watching him play because he gets whatever he wants to go. He's incredibly strong, great hands, great IQ, great touch. Doesn't matter that he is not as athletic as the guys that are guarding him or multiple guys that are thrown at him. Last night was the first time I remember watching him play, and he looked completely overwhelmed athletically. And you just don't see that out of him where it did matter. It wasn't enough to have the skill and the strength and the IQ and the feel and the read. Didn't matter with that kind of just a bar fight that broke out. And that's what it felt like. And it felt like a bar fight where the Timberwolves were sitting down for a team meal, trying to have some quiet time. And the Timberwolves walked into this saloon and all hell broke loose, breaking bottles on the bar and challenging them to a fight. Like, that's what it felt like. And it just felt like they weren't, and Jokic included, they weren't up for this, man. They did not have the stomach or the athletic ability to deal with this. And so you say, well, what could possibly change between now and Friday? What could change? There's no doubt their pride has been damaged. And if you're ever going to get the best response you're going to get out of them in this series, it's going to be Friday night, because you're going to run the risk of being swept if you don't win that game. So there's no doubt it'll be their best effort. How is that going to be close to good enough with what we saw last night? And by the way, we got to talk about Murray, the elephant in the room. Are they going to be missing Jamal Murray for that game?
Well, let's get to that. One more point, though, I have here. Sometimes, like a great team, the whole league will start to adjust to try to solve them, right? Like, you have a great team. It's like the Warriors. All right, we have to beat a team that's designed now to beat them, and everybody starts doing that. I think only the Timberwolves did this, and it's not a coincidence. It's because they got Tim Conley. I think Tim Conley said, look, Jokic and Murray and these Nuggets are coming. We have to build a team that is prepared for them, and he built a great team. But I think everybody, part of what I keep wondering over the last 24 hours is the book out on how to stop this group of players? One, length on Jokic. We saw this in the bubble with Dwight Howard, JaVale McGee, Anthony Davis. You get three centers, you rotate them in there. That clearly, athletically, that bothers Denver. Athleticism on the wings, put a lot of length, because if you're going to be trying to post up, double, and kick out, you better have length to cover for that strategy. Yeah. The Wolves have that. And then pressuring Jamal Murray, as good of a player as he is, he's not the best athlete, and he's not, like, you can disrupt him physically if you get into him. Those three things, to me, that's the recipe for beating Denver. And the Wolves built a team that is not just good, but great at all three of those things. And part of me wonders if legs, again, we'll have this conversation probably more if Denver does lose. But right now it's looking like there is a formula to solving Denver. And if there's a formula, I almost feel like you can't go forward with it. You almost have to say, like, okay, there's a formula to beat us. Something drastic has to change. And it just looks to me like that's the formula for Denver.
I can't really add anything more to that. I will say this: in watching that game last night, how does anybody watch that game and not make Minnesota the favorite to win the whole thing?
I agree.
How? I know.
They got it all.
I know what the Celtics did in the regular season. I also know that, and who knows, this is, getting way ahead of ourselves. A lot of basketball to be played, a lot of wins still for the Timberwolves to have to take place to even get to the finals. And same with Boston. And, so you say, well, okay, well, Porzingis, that's, that could be a couple weeks away at least. Is he going to be back? That's a big factor in that series. They're going to need his length if this were the matchup. I don't know how you watch what you watched, any of us watched last night, defensively, what that looked like. And by the way, they're also at the same time making shots. It's not like this was, an 88-80 game. Okay. It wasn't Minnesota's making shots. They've got offensive firepower too. They've got a star offensive player, multiple, really, if you count Karl Anthony Towns. And then they got a bunch of other dudes that are very comfortable in their lane, and they supplement it, and they all make shots. And so they're complete, but the defense is something that it's hard to imagine any team operating comfortably against if they maintain that level of readiness that they were showing us last night. So for me, I don't have to make predictions on series because we got a lot of basketball to play, but that was really eye-opening. It's going to be hard for me to dismiss that when it comes time, if we get there. And I'm thinking about Boston, Minnesota finals. That's going to be hard to get that image out of my head last night, what I saw in the first 24 minutes of that game.
I think both OKC and Dallas are designed to handle that on-ball pressure better. But definitely, again, there's more layers to the Timberwolves defense than just the ball pressure. It's just that Denver didn't get past the first layer, so nothing else mattered last night. Lastly, Jamal Murray, horrible playoffs, horrible game last night, and a complete meltdown in the official's ear all night, and then on the bench twice threw something onto the court. Once a towel that landed right behind a referee on the baseline, and then a heat pack that actually landed on the court. Nobody noticed it in real time. I didn't even notice it in real time. But obviously now there's the tape of it. You could see very clearly what was going on. First of all, such a childish act. Like I can't believe it even happened. I don't even think anything needs to be said about how sad of a moment that is for Jamal Murray. But now the question becomes, throwing things on the court, is that a suspendable offense to you, Legs?
I don't know how honestly, look, it's the last thing I want. I'm actually going to be doing the color analysis for ESPN on this game on Friday, game 3. Okay. I got that assignment yesterday. Very excited about that, man. I was like, this is going to be, especially if it had been 1-1. Friday night was going to be epic. Like, wow, this is like the biggest game in this point of the postseason. This is the biggest game in the playoffs. Down 2-0 feels a little bit different, especially the way the two played out. Still, you're thinking, okay, this is still going to be, should be a great game. Hopefully, if Denver comes with a response. So I don't want him to be suspended, Adam. How do you not suspend him? I will be shocked if he's not, because the league has to think about 2 things. Well, 3 really. If we're going to assume he threw that at Mark Davis, okay, he threw something at an official. Okay, just because you missed them, that doesn't mean that you get off. But more importantly, it went, and I know what those heat packs feel like. They got a little bit of weight to them. They're wet. And they're about this thick.
They have some weight to them. Yeah, they could have hurt someone.
It goes onto the court. Karl-Anthony Towns almost stepped on the side of that. Could have rolled his ankle. A player could have stepped on top of it and had it slide out, where now you hurt a groin potentially. Okay, it's a reckless act. Reckless. There's no other word for it, and it's petulant, like you said. It's petulant. And it's reckless. And so, if you're the league, how in the world can you not set a precedent right here? And the reason that none of us really knew exactly this morning, we were talking about this, is what's going to happen is because it's uncharted territory. I've never heard of such a thing. I've heard players throwing things into the stands. We just saw Patrick Beverley do it the other night. I've seen guys throw their mouthpieces and gum. And guess what? All that stuff is usually going to warrant a minimum technical, if not an ejection. They said last night he would have gotten a technical if they had seen it happen in the moment. Just a technical? That's shocking to me because of if player safety's number one priority, this has to be, to me, a suspension. I don't want it to happen. I wish there was another way around it. I just don't know how the league doesn't take that kind of action to set precedent going forward. You cannot throw something onto the court if you're sitting on the bench as a player. Can't do it. And I think that's where we're gonna end up.
Jamal Murray being mentioned with Pat Beverley. That's tough, man. That's tough, but accurate, but appropriate.
I just want to say something real quick. Anybody that thinks, because I heard Draymond had some comments on this, and I'm just like, he's like, oh, everybody wants to jump to suspension. Everybody just calm down. Why we got to talk suspension? I'm going, come on, man. You also threw a roundhouse punch at Nurkic and said you were jostling for position in the post. So stop with that.
Right.
Okay?
Well, also, there was a lot of lead-ups. With Draymond, there's a lot of lead-ups. And with Murray, look, man, this is an unraveling. Like, part of me thinks, who knows?
Yeah, the frustration component is built in there. The whole thing.
Up.
I feel like the league just has to take that stance on it. And by the way, one of the worst sprained ankles I ever had in my career was I was warming up before a game, doing a warm-up routine, and there was a television cable that was running along the edge of the court, and I stepped on it, and I rolled my ankle, and I missed a game because of the swelling in my ankle. And the reason I bring that up, that television cable is about this thick, Adam. It's the same exact thickness as that heat pack. So to think that anybody thinks that, like, oh, you're overstating, somebody could have got hurt. No, I'm not. I'm not overstating it. It could have, and by the way, KCP kicked it. It could have been him too, because he inadvertently kicked the thing. He could have rolled it. It could have been your own teammate that you injured. I don't want any of it to happen. I hate it that we're talking about it. But I don't see how. I'll be shocked if the league does not suspend him for game 3.
The Wolves look incredible. They look like a great story. And to me, it feels like a matter now of when, not if, if they get through this Nugget series. Do the Nuggets have a little bit of fight? Do they look different? Do they have an adjustment in them? There's so many questions that answering one of them is not going to get even the series. So we'll see what happens, and we'll see what happens with Jamal Murray. We should probably know by the time we record our next show on Thursday. Let's take a break. On the other side, though, we do have another game to talk about, and it was a much better, or at least closer game than this one was, and that was, of course, the Knicks pulling one out at the end. Some controversial calls, and honestly, an impressive game from the Pacers until it wasn't. So we'll get Legs' thoughts on all of that and more on the other side. First, I want to tell you guys about AG1. Not only does the AG1 deliver my daily dose of vitamins, minerals, pre and probiotics, and more, but it's a powerful, healthy habit that is also powerfully simple. It's just one scoop mixed in water once a day, every single day. It's that simple. It takes about 5 seconds to make. And you can start your day, replace your coffee that gives you, that big jolt of jittery energy, maybe makes you anxious and then crashes you midday to you almost fall asleep at your desk. You replace it with something healthier like AG1. AG1 is a supplement I trust to provide the support my body needs daily, and that's why I'm excited to welcome them as our new partner. If you want to take ownership of your health, it starts with AG1. Try AG1 and get a free 1-year supply of vitamin D3, K2, and 5 free AG1 travel packs. Those are super nice because they come in individual packaging, so you just like on the go. If you're in your hotel room, you open it up and you can use just the cup they give you in your hotel room with some water, and it works really nicely. So you get the travel packs. You can also order the travel packs, by the way, online if you're always on the go. But they'll give it to you free with your first purchase exclusively at drinkag1.com/allnba. That's drinkag1.com/ALLNBA. It's also in the description of the show. Check it out. Also want to tell you guys about DraftKings Pick 6, this presenting sponsor of today's show. Do you ever play that over-under game with your friends or maybe with your spouse? Over or under 30 minutes before it takes your wife to get ready to go out? Or how many times will your boss call you big dog at work on a Monday? Maybe you play that over-under game in your life. If you do, then you're going to love Pick 6. It's the new fantasy game from DraftKings, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. And here's how simple it is to play. You pick between 2 and 6 players and choose if they'll have more or less of a certain stat: rebounds, points, assists, etc. You track your picks and play against others for a shot to win huge cash prizes. For example, you could probably go for Jokic points under, Jamal Murray assists under, Nickeil Alexander-Walker blocks over, and there you go. You set your team, and you're probably going to win in Game 3. So download the new DraftKings Pick 6 app now and use code ALLNBA for a shot at huge cash prizes. That's code ALLNBA only on DraftKings Pick 6. The crown is yours.
Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. 18 and over in most eligible states. Age varies by jurisdiction. Eligibility restrictions apply. Pick 6 not available in all states, including but not limited to Connecticut and New York. For up-to-date list of states, visit dkng.co/pick6states. Void where prohibited. See terms at pick6.draftkings.com/promos.
All right, back here in segment 2 of the All-NBA show. If you're watching live, do us a favor and throw us a like down below. If you haven't subscribed yet, subscribe. You're not going to want to miss Legs' Takes 4 times a week live for an hour on these playoffs. I thought the Pacers were unbelievably impressive in this game. A lot of fight. You got good contributions from a wide variety of players. The game was played at their pace. Everything was coming up Pacers until the very end when it wasn't. Kind of a meltdown, some questionable calls, but also another heroic performance from the Nova Knicks, Brunson, Hart, DiVincenzo. Hart played all 48 minutes again. Brunson scored 43 points again. And the Knicks just keep finding ways to win, Legs.
Yeah, so there's a lot here. Okay, let's start with the positive. Let's just talk about Jalen Brunson first and the fact that we're watching now apparently one of the most unstoppable offensive forces in the playoffs in any of our lifetimes. That's not an exaggeration. That's not an exaggeration. You see the lists, 4 straight 40-point games. And the fifth one, by the way, was 39, or else he's got 5 straight going. And it's the shot making when they have to have it, and particularly last night. It was one big jumper after another that they had to have, any one of which, he misses 2 shots in a row last night. They lose that game by 6 or 8 points. Like, that's how they were hanging on there at one point. Getting to his spots, I think Nembhard is a terrible matchup. It's a terrible idea to go with him. Nesmith has to be the primary defender on him, and you're going to get switches sometimes so Nembhard can get him. They're choosing to put Nembhard on him, and right. Jalen Brunson's salivating as a result. He's too small. Jalen Brunson is physically knocking him back, and then he's leaning back to get separation. He's only 6'2". He's getting off the ground, and you need a longer arm to be able to get that contest and make it a legitimate contest. Nembhard actually got to the point where he wasn't even contesting all that much. His feet weren't leaving the ground. He was kind of demoralized by the fact that he couldn't deal with this guy. He's a load. He's strong. He's got great footwork, and Nembhard is not big enough. Nembhard can guard a lot of guys in this league. When you add the kind of physical strength with the footwork and the shooting touch that Brunson has, it's a bad matchup. You need a bigger player on him, and that is going to be Nesmith. And there was a couple times they got switches last night where Nesmith had him, and then Brunson would then go set another screen. So they'd switch back, and then Nembhard would be in a great position to deny him the ball, and he wouldn't. Brunson would just pop out, catch it and play, and then he'd shoot over him. So there's a lot of tweaking that Rick Carlisle and this team needs to do. A lot of good things happened in this game, man, starting with pace, and they did not get crushed on the offensive glass. These were two major factors in the Philly series. Indiana had the pace exactly how they wanted it, and they kept them off the offensive glass for the most part. Only 8 offensive rebounds in the game. It was a major factor in the Philly series. So they did those two things, and they still lost because they couldn't contain Brunson late. They had some turnovers that were really costly. Haliburton was a no-show, and they had some really bizarre calls go against them in the last minute of the game. But I wanted to start with Brunson, and he continues to blow my mind with how unstoppable he has become.
So I 100% agree. We'll get to the Haliburton piece of this as well. The Knicks, it's one of these things where the Knicks have earned breaks coming their way all playoffs, and they've had a couple breaks go their way, but they've earned them by the way they have, competed, even in the toughest moments. That being said, they did get a couple breaks down the stretch, and I'm curious your thoughts on them. The first one, the illegal screen at the very end, it reminds you of the UConn-Iowa game, right? The women's game in the playoffs, an illegal screen in that moment. I thought the UConn-Iowa one was significantly more egregious than whatever happened with Miles Turner.
No question.
You slow that play down, does Miles Turner kind of like lean a hip into it? Kind of. But I think I look at that one and I go, that to me, it's like holding in the NFL. If there's a slight hold, he had a little bit of hold here, and then there's an egregious one. This one was as little of movement you can get on a screen to have any shred of doubt in whether or not it was a foul. I don't think it was, but I'm curious what you thought.
All right. So here's the major problem I have with this. And this is why it's not going to be in the 2-minute report. Technically, they're going to say the reason they called it, he didn't give the defender enough time to see the screen coming. Whatever.
Right.
The amount of contact on the play, I wouldn't want to see that called at any time in any game except maybe for 4th graders with that level of contact. There was almost no contact. Dante DiVincenzo took the biggest risk by selling out on it to that point. If he doesn't get the call, they're playing 5-on-4 with Turner being wide open with a chance to win the game or take the lead. And here's the thing, Adam, I look at it 2 ways. First is this. 40 seconds before that happened, 2 things happened on the same play. Both went against the Pacers. On the play that they called the kick, that turned out it wasn't a kick. It's a tie game, 115 all. Nesmith deflects it with his hand in real time. I thought it was a kick too. Everybody did watching the game. No one saw it until you saw the replay. And of course, the Indiana Pacers immediately were saying, review it. Here's the problem. For whatever reason, and I need somebody from the league to explain this, why a kicked ball is not reviewable. I don't know, because it could be a critical play, but it's not reviewable. That's just bad luck. The refs missed it, and it's not reviewable. Okay, play on. Here's the problem, Adam. 3 seconds before that happened, Jalen Brunson is dribbling the ball up the floor at half court. Dante DiVincenzo sets a screen to get him free with 2 arms up by his chin in a full outward motion, like a body block. And I can't remember who it was. Might have been Nesmith, whoever it was, directly into his shoulder, and then grabbed his arm, held it for a half a count, and then he put his arms above his head as he backed away, said, I didn't do anything. There was 10 times the amount of contact and anything that would look like an illegal screen on that play. And they let it go. So now, okay, they don't get the kick right. I don't blame them for that. They missed it, and the mechanism's not there to review it. Whatever it is, what it is. On that possession, right, DiVincenzo hits the 3, take the lead. That screen, that Turner set, to me, forget time in the game. I don't want that screen called ever in an NBA game with the how little contact there was on that play. But when you add into it that you didn't call the DiVincenzo screen and the time in the game, that is egregious. And it ruined everybody really from the end of what was one of those entertaining games I've watched all year. Let's see the outcome here. And we never got to that point because that play changed all of that. And it's unfortunate for the Pacers. And then, by the way, the dead ball foul right after that, which was really a dumb play by Nembhard, which took them out of any chance to have a game-tying 3, grabs Brunson before the ball's inbounded. They get the 1 free throw and then the 2 free throws, and the game was over. But I go back to that screen. It deprived everybody in the building of a chance to see what the outcome was going to be of a great game. And by the way, Thibodeau wasn't going to complain if they didn't call that. Nobody on that team would have said a word if that wasn't called, because no one was expecting that to be called. And I think the league is going to come out. It'll be the 2-minute report that he got it right. If the DiVincenzo screen that wasn't called at half court right before that is not in the 2-minute report, that was missed, there's something really wrong with the league, and something's got to be looked at, because that was an egregious offensive foul on the screen DiVincenzo set. And they didn't call it because there was no disruption to play. So they were just kind of like, okay, play on. No harm here. Well, that play down there, DiVincenzo sold out to get the call, and he got it. And you rewarded the acting. And I have a problem with it, man. I have a real problem with it, because there was just not enough contact to decide the game like that.
Yeah, I 100% agree on both of those plays. And I'm glad you brought up the one about the kick ball, because I'm watching this one as I prepare for the Nuggets. So I actually, in that moment, I actually didn't even have the audio of the game on. So I saw it and wondered why it wasn't challenged. I didn't realize that was the reason that they didn't challenge it. But it was a crazy one. And those plays to go in their favor is quite a drag, because to be honest with you, this game was going to come down to who executed in the clutch. And those 2 plays could have swung it a little bit. Let's go to the other side again, though, and talk about Haliburton. 6 points, 8 assists, 4 steals. 2 of 5 from 3. That's the only shots he hit, and one of those was right at the buzzer, to end the half. What are you seeing from him that is making him so much less effective as a scorer?
Completely lost all semblance of aggressiveness, looking for his own shot. There was a half a dozen times I wrote down notes the whole game, as I typically do in the playoffs. I bet half a dozen times I wrote down, why didn't he not shoot that? He had space. Now, he's got a slow delivery. He's got a long release time, but when he's confident, he finds a way to get that off. And there were times last night when he went to a sidestep, or a guy went under a screen, or a couple times in transition when he'd normally walk into that 3. He wouldn't take the shot. There's something was not right between the ears last night with his confidence level. And somebody tried to dismiss it as, I still don't think he's right. He's dealing with injury. No, come on, stop. He averaged 16 in the Milwaukee series. Now, that's not his best. That's not what he was during the season. That's certainly not what he was during the in-season tournament when he blew up, right? I get it, but 16 points? Come on, man. He had big moments in the Milwaukee series, and if you give him 16 points last night, they win the game by 8. The fact that he was a non-factor offensively was shocking to me, and I think it's really something that I think watching the film, he's going to be watching himself saying he can't believe the way that he played. I use the expression an Amelia Earhart game, talking about guys when they just disappear and they're still looking for him. Like, that's what I felt about Haliburton. This is a matchup of the 2 elite point guards going head to head, and that's as one-sided as it gets, because Haliburton did not put an imprint on that game in any way, and that obviously has to change for game 2.
And by the way, TJ McConnell was able to score. He had 18 points, 9 of 16 shooting.
He was great. Yeah.
So it's not, because you might say, okay, well, what are they doing? Are they walling this off? But not everybody's being affected in the same way. Haliburton, it's been an interesting back half of the season, an interesting playoffs. He has some things I'm sure he's going to have to go to the drawing board this offseason. My last comment here is just about Josh Hart. I think he is the number 1 biggest dog in him in the entire NBA. 48 minutes. Yeah. Makes countless big-time plays, almost has a triple-double, 24, 13 rebounds, 8 assists, 3 steals, 1 block, just does everything. And that guy, if you didn't know and you only watched the last 2 minutes of this game and said, who's the guy that's played the most minutes tonight, there's no way you'd guess Josh Hart, because that guy somehow has so much energy. I'm so impressed with him. That team only plays 5 guys with a little, just tiny little breaks from 3 guys off the bench. But Josh Hart, of all of them, just does everything for he's like having 3 guys. Like, he gives them depth because he's 3 different players in one. And I can't say enough good things about him. He's been one of the big him and Nickeil Alexander-Walker, 2 of the big winners of the playoffs so far.
I couldn't agree more. And Josh Hart, they said it on the broadcast last night. I thought it was a great point. He has to be the most highly conditioned athlete in the league.
Has to be.
No, I mean, he literally is never winded. And he's not just playing 48 minutes. He's playing 48 minutes with a reckless abandon and an intensity that's greater than anybody else on the court.
He's sprinting the marathon.
That's it. Running down loose ball rebounds in the 47th minute. Like, it doesn't make any sense how highly conditioned he is. It's incredible what he's doing right now with the minutes he's playing and the level of intensity with which he's playing. There's all kinds of graphics been popping up today about these Nova guys. And I didn't see this one. And I'm going,
so cool.
Has there ever been a playoff game where three guys that played on the same team in college scored 92 points in a playoff game? I mean, the only thing missing from that game last night was Chris Jenkins hitting a three-pointer to win the game the way that he did in the national championship game against Carolina. Like, there's nothing else. And the funny thing is, they had Ryan Arcidiacono, who threw that pass to Jenkins right. On the team. He got traded from the Knicks in the Bogdanovich deal, and he ended up in Detroit. But or else they had four Nova guys. These three Nova guys combined for 92 points in the game. You might be able to survive Brunson going for 40. You're not surviving Brunson 40, DiVincenzo 25, and Hart 24. You're not surviving that. And so here's I feel like there's two ways to look at this game, Adam. On one hand, I say, wow, impressive. The Pacers accomplished two major goals. The pace of the game was exactly the way they wanted it, and they did a good job controlling the defensive glass. So you look at it that way and say, okay, great. You were able to impose your style on them. But then the other part of me says, but you still lost the game. Yeah. The Knicks were okay playing at that pace for stretches, and it got them back in the game, actually. So I'm not sure exactly where I feel like where this is about to go for game two. I think all bets are off still on how this series is about to go, because that couldn't have been more entertaining than it was in game one, man.
Do you agree with my assessment now of the Knicks? The Knicks and the Wolves both have this thing where it's like their identity is solid and everybody knows exactly what they have to do every night. And to me, it's just such a big thing. Every year in the playoffs, teams fall apart in that way and teams come together in that way. And when I watch the Knicks and the Wolves, they both have there's so much clarity in what it is that makes them win and why they win games. And every game they just go out and do that. And I just think there's something so valuable about that. And not every team has it. There's still teams in the playoffs. I mean, even look at Dallas, who, we've both been very high on. They kind of got it together in the last two games against the Clippers, so we'll see tonight if they have it. But even they don't have that clarity, in my opinion, that the Knicks, the Wolves, you could probably say the Celtics, and the Thunder so far, although the Thunder haven't really been tested. But those teams, the Wolves and the Knicks in particular, seem to know exactly what the task is, and they go out and do it. There's did the Knicks play the right way tonight? They played exactly the way they know they have to play every single night.
Totally agree. And I think there's the two teams that have risen above the rest, just in terms of this category of you're going to have to kill us to stop us, is Minnesota and the Knicks. That part of it looks the same. It's a relentlessness that is very difficult to deal with when you sustain it for 48 minutes. And that's what the Knicks were able to do last night. And they needed every single one of those minutes because that's how well Indiana played in this game. And look, they played that well despite the fact that Haliburton was a non-factor. Siakam was okay. He wasn't great. They got great performances up and down their roster. I mean, TJ McConnell, I was blown away by how great TJ McConnell was in this game. Miles Turner was great in this game. They got big performances from some other guys. Other guys, Jackson and Ben Shepherd and Obi Toppin was really good. They got great performances by a couple guys, really good performances out of a bunch of other guys. And then the two star players, one was okay and one was a no-show. And yet they were in the game. And the Knicks, found themselves on the verge of losing a game like I just described, and yet they just keep coming at you. And then you have to have the final component, which is, can someone please navigate this pressure of this moment and make a big shot? And Brunson does it time and time and time again. So, man, give me more of what I saw last night. I hope this goes 7 games because that was fun to watch that last night.
Yeah. All right, let's move on to tonight's games. We got a couple of great ones. We have one great one. We'll see what happens. But tonight, the Mavs and the Thunder. This series to me, I'm so excited for. Yeah. I just mentioned the Mavs. They started to get it together at the end of that Clipper series and started to look like their old self. Luka in particular. Kyrie obviously was amazing. The Thunder have had a long break and, by the way, did not play a very competitive first round. So what are you looking for as this series gets underway?
Thunder had a long break. Mavericks got a nice little break here between series. Considering it was a 6-gamer, sometimes you got to turn right back around and play 48 hours later.
Yep.
And they didn't have to do that in this case. This couldn't have worked out better for them. They extended all the way through the weekend into Tuesday before they had to play again. It's huge for them. So, and the Thunder have been sitting there. I'm not a big believer in the rust component of this stuff. I think rest is always better, even if you have a little bit of problem finding your rhythm early in the game. Whatever, you're going to get there quickly. These guys have been playing together all year. They got great continuity. So they might, maybe at the beginning, maybe they struggle to make some shots. That's an irrelevant point. The rest is always better. Fresh legs overcome an awful lot in the playoffs, and I think both teams have pretty fresh legs coming into this. And I think. Look, I picked Dallas to go to conference finals a long time ago. This is the matchup I thought we were going to get in the second round. We got it. Here it is, and I'm sticking with it. I think the Mavericks are going to win the series. I think Luka will be the difference. I think Dallas's frontline guys, Gafford and Lively, are going to be big in this series. Oklahoma City's undersized. They've got Chet. They don't have much behind him, and he's going to be active. He comes to block a lot of shots. He's got to provide a lot of help on Luka and Kyrie, and I think Lively and Gafford are going to have a much more impact in this series than they did in the Clippers series. They were better at the end of that series. They were really shut out in the beginning of the series. I was surprised by it. Clippers have more size on that front line, and Zubac took it to them. I think you're going to see something a little different here. I think those guys get back to being very, very impactful. Clearly, Oklahoma City is good enough to win the series. They're the 1 seed in the West. They could win it. I won't be surprised by it. I think it's going to be a long series, and at the end of the day, I'm going to put my money on Luka Doncic in close games, in big moments, and in getting them through when they need to, whenever that presents itself. Like this is a must-have moment. My money's on Luka.
Is there somebody on the Thunder that you have your eye on tonight that you think is especially interesting?
Well, Jalen Williams, I think this is going to be, it could be his coming out party to the rest of the country. You and I know it. A lot of NBA fans know it. Everybody in Oklahoma City knows it. If you really watching the league and doing it for a living like we are, you know it already. They have that first round series, they sweep. There wasn't a lot of interest in that series going in because Zion was out. It just, it was that one series. Like and Orlando, Cleveland kind of fell into this category too. Just didn't get a lot of talk on any of these type of shows. I didn't talk much about either series. This is the series and the moment for Jalen Williams. And he's going to be, look, it's that co-star matchup, him and Kyrie, right? Those two guys, because you kind of know what Luka and Shea are going to do, man. They just do it every night against everybody. They're going to do it in this series too. So now you slide over 1 seat. Who's in that co-pilot's chair? Jalen Williams and Kyrie Irving. And I am fascinated to see that matchup, even though they might not be directly guarding each other all the time. Dort will be on Luka, so I guess Jalen Williams will be on Kyrie probably a decent amount. It's going to be fascinating to watch, man. Him play offensively in this series to try to match what you're going to get out of Kyrie Irving on the other end.
And then let's go to the other game that's happening tonight, the Cavs and the Celtics. You talk about that quick turnaround. That's the Cavs. They obviously played 48 hours ago. Now they have to go into Boston. We don't give the Cavs a ton of opportunity in this series. We don't think they have a great chance, but what is one thing you're looking for from them tonight?
Well, look, they got dragged out in that series. No road team won a game, and now here they got to go back on the road again. They lost 3 times in Orlando. They got to go right back on the road to Boston. A big factor in this game, and I haven't seen. Is there any word on Jared Allen?
I don't think he's playing. I don't think he's playing.
Okay.
Let me do a quick look.
I hadn't heard as that series came to an end. I'm looking now. Yeah, Jared Allen, game time decision. He's listed as.
Okay.
Now that's a big difference for them. No Porzingis. You add Jared Allen to the mix. I give Cleveland a better chance. Look, Boston can hit you with these waves at home and try to end you. Could happen. I don't think that at any point we're going to wonder if Boston's going to win this series. I don't think it'll ever get to that point. I'm not going to just dismiss Cleveland. Getting Jared Allen back and the impact he can have in protecting the rim and the offensive rebounding impact he can have without Porzingis on the floor, I'm not going to dismiss that. Guy's a big-time player getting back into this lineup. If that's the case, I think Cleveland can win. If the over-under is a game and a half, they could win 2 games. They could win 2 games. I'm not going to be shocked. Maybe it's one. I don't think they get swept. I don't think they get swept, and I don't think it's just one blowout after another. I don't think that's going to happen. I think Cleveland's a little bit better than that, and Boston's missing a key guy.
I think this one's a rough. I might say sweep, but you know what? We'll see what happens in this one. Let's hit that outro music, Emma, and then I know we got a super chat in here, so let's see. Somebody's super chatting on this one. Psycho Blue, he says, if you told someone 3 years ago the Timberwolves were playing like this, they'd think they stepped into the Twilight Zone. Meanwhile, how about them Knicks? It's true, but that's what's great about, the NBA. You get a new front office in there. They make a crazy decision that everybody hates in bringing in Rudy Gobert. You remember the feedback when they made that trade. They were going to run Tim Connelly out of town in his first week on the job. Here you are just 1 year later, and they look like a favorite to win the title. The Timberwolves, a team that, has not had playoff success in general in their history, and now they look like a juggernaut. It's a great story. It's why we love sports, Legs.
Got it. No doubt about it. Listen, I'll be the first to admit I wasn't a huge fan at the time. I was trying to wrap my head around a team getting significantly bigger when the rest of the league was getting smaller. It was like, how is this going to work? Well, it's worked out pretty well, pairing them together, and then the just ascension of Anthony Edwards as a legitimate star offensive player in this league.
Where does he rank for you on most fun players to watch? Just fun, pure fun, must see TV.
Yeah, he'd be in the top 5. I mean, I'd put Curry in there. I'd put Luka in there for sure.
Yeah.
I definitely would put Anthony Edwards in my top 5, no doubt about it.
I love watching him compete, man. That's the thing. I think I'm prisoner of the moment. He might be number 1 for me at the moment. But everybody, it was a great show. The Nuggets not back till Friday. Very curious to see. But in the meantime, we're going to get a lot of these other series catching up. We'll have plenty to talk about. We're off tomorrow. We're back Thursday. Hit that like button for us. We'll see you then.
We all silly like the mayor.